growing up in Devon, it was really difficult. There was lots of challenges that I faced, and my friends faced as well, and that always informed my writing a lot. I wrote a lot of autobiographical stuff and stuff about rural living. And then in 2018, I had a really tumultuous, difficult year. But one of the kind of silver linings of that year was that I started working with a band called Jacobol, and we were doing kind of these weird prog rock poetry fusions. And it was going well. We did lots of gigs, and eventually we decided to write a show. And I knew that I had this story that I wanted to tell, which was the story of growing up in this small town in Devon and my friends there and the people that we lost and the people that we grew to become. So we kind of got in a room together and kind of thrashed it out and made this show that's all about those places and those people, with lots of loud music in it.
When you thank you for that, I appreciate the kindness there. When you're referring to some of the difficulties, the troubles, what specifically are you referring to?
Yeah, so what I grew up around and what I kept seeing again and again is that, in these small towns, in small rural towns, there are these secrets that you only know if you grew up in those places, which is that there are no resources for young people. There's nothing for young people to do. So ultimately what you do end up doing is tempting some adult who's outside the shop to buy you some cider. You go into a park, you drink the cider, and that becomes like the first step into this party to party lifestyle that you live. You go to house parties, you go to the person's house whose parents let them smoke, and then you end up having another party there. And it's like this slide that you take into hedonism and partying because there's nothing else to do, and the connections that you make in those places are the connections that you really, really crave. But what happens to a lot of people there is that you get stuck in that place, and it happens from quite a young age, and you slip into adulthood, and suddenly you're at that point where you don't have school to attach to anymore. You just have these people that you party with, and the impact of that can be really felt. And so many young people just get lost to that, and we lose our friends and we lose our sense of selves in this kind of hedonistic haze. And I wanted to kind of shine a light on that and speak about that because I felt like it wasn't really spoken about. And I found that people who did know that and had sort of gotten out of that, however they had, they were keen to just leave it in the past and not face it. But I would see over and over again on Facebook or in a local newspaper that another young person has lost their life to this lifestyle. And it just felt to me like I needed to give legacy to the people that I know who I lost. And that we keep losing to this same silence around that particular way of living.
Is it Ashburton? Is that the kind of area you're talking about? And are you happy for me to say that?
Yeah. So the show takes place in Ashburton. I grew up in Ashburton, and it's never named explicitly in the show, but I make no secret about it because this show is so close to me, and we haven't performed the show in Ashburton, but we did a kind of pro-shoot, professionally filmed version of it, which was shown at the Arts Centre there. And even the fact there's an Arts Centre there is amazing, because when I grew up there, it was like there was really nothing at all. So it feels quite scary in some ways to look at that town and say, like, there are these fundamental flaws that still exist there, to be honest. Like, that town has changed a lot, and it's a lot bougier now than when I grew up there, but that doesn't mean that those same people aren't there and those same issues don't exist. It just feels really important to be honest about that, and to be honest about, that there are these idyllic places that are really beautiful. You can walk out of your house and there's all this beauty and all this space, but at the same time that can be really suffocating for some people, and those things sit equally weighted in places like that, and it's important to give them both the attention they deserve.
And obviously, when you're doing this, you're remembering people, you're remembering individuals, you're not imagining them. That makes it a bit harder, doesn't it? Is it obvious who the people are, do you think, or are they in this representations of those people?
So when I was writing it, I was very, very careful to protect those people. So they're all renamed, and some of the timelines are shifted around for storytelling. It's based on real people and real events, and it's all very true. But I did a lot to make sure that those people, as well as giving legacy to them and making sure their stories get told, that they're protected from the storytelling nature of it. Because, for the people who still remain, be there the people in the show or their families or their friends, they're still there and they're still going to experience the show. Lots of them have seen the show, so it felt important to me to be able to go, okay, there is the truth, there's like the actual facts, the things that happened, and then there's the story, and it's about maintaining that truth without feeling the need to go like, this is regimented, everything that happens. There's lots of talk at the moment about real life stories and autobiographical stories and the kind of the morals and ethics of that, and it's something that you always need to be aware of, I think, as a writer. And yeah, I've always maintained that it's a true story, it's a real story, but those people, they still exist and existed, and that needs to be honoured as well.
What do you hope people take away from it? Because obviously, you're highlighting these issues that are often forgotten, but do you hope it's a bit of a catalyst for change? Is that kind of what you're expecting as well in some ways?
Yeah, that's always the hope. It's what's funny about the show is that when I talk about it and when I do interviews and stuff and tell people about it, it feels like it's going to be really heavy and depressing, but it's a really hopeful show. It's really full of joy, and ultimately it's about connection. I think it's about connection between people who are part of the show, people who come to it and they see something of themselves or their friends in it, to go, oh yeah, there are sad things that happened, but there are joyful things as well, and that's equally as important as everything else. And it's also about how creativity can really help us to heal. Like, so much of the show is about that process of making something out of something that could have caused or has caused lots of trauma, and go, okay, that happened, how can we pick that up and bring it to the light? So yeah, I really hope that people come away from the show feeling really held and feeling like, they've experienced something emotional, but that isn't a negative thing. Like, that's a safe place to land, and they can go forth and remember those people, remember those times, without the shame that sometimes they can bring.